Welcome to the Meg and Maggie podcast, where we bring you conversations of overall wellness. We believe in challenging the all or nothing approach to our health by focusing on simple and sustainable practices for your everyday life.
We are so happy you're here with us. Now let's get into today's episode.
Everyone, welcome back to episode 63. Every time I go to intro, I'm like, don't say hello, everyone, but I don't know what else to say. I always I want to say hi, guys. Hello, welcome. But today we are really excited to bring you an episode that is near and dear to our hearts, which most of them always are, but this one especially is because Maggie and I consider ourselves recovering all or nothing type people. So some people may call this like perfectionist type. Some people call this all or nothing, black and white thinkers. There's a lot of like different analogies thrown out there for people that we used to be with these tendencies. So I think the best thing for us to do to intro this episode, Maggie, is describe what a person who suffers from that type of thinking thinks like. Bring us back to like 5 years ago, Maggie. Like, what were kind of like some of the symptoms, if you will, of this non-helpful mental situation?
Yeah. Yep. We're just gonna go there. I want to start off by saying that I am going to be talking about 5 years ago, Maggie. However, 5 years ago, Maggie still shows up today. Okay. So going back like straight to the theme of this episode. Okay. Just because you work hard on changing something about yourself doesn't mean it's not going to show up in the future, right? Okay. We just know how to recognize it and become aware that it's there and choose differently, right? Sometimes, and sometimes we don't, and that's fine. Okay. So I just want to start there because that is the biggest, I would say, symptom of this thinking for me, right? Which was, okay, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to make this change and I'm going to do it 100%. I'm going to do it every single day. I'm going to do it all the time. I'm going to be perfect at this. And then I'm never going to have this problem again in my life. Right. And yeah, no, that's just not how anything works. That's not how change works. Right. And it's interesting because we've been so conditioned to see and just believe that, change happens so fast. And if you choose something differently today, then you're just never going to struggle with that thing again. Right. And let's take like drinking as an example, right? Some people quit drinking cold turkey or smoking or whatever habit, right? And they never go back to it again. And from the outside, you're like, wow, how in the world did you do that? Right. But when you quit something like that, like for me, for example, I don't drink anymore, right? I quit drinking one day. I was like, I'm not drinking anymore. And I stopped. And I still think about alcohol every day. And I wasn't a heavy drinker, by any means, but I still think about that part of my life every single day. Right. So I didn't really get to the 5 years ago Maggie yet, but it's so important that when we look at this and we hear someone explain how they used to think and how they used to be versus how we think and are now, that we don't look at it and think, well, I could never do that because that person is probably only showing you the shiny side. Right. So 5 years ago, Maggie used to, I'm so happy that this does not consume me in the same way that it used to. 5 years ago, Maggie used to decide that she needed to change something. Okay. So maybe it was my exercise program. Maybe it was the way I was eating. Maybe it was how many books I was going to read this year. Maybe it was whatever. Okay. And I would decide, okay, this year I'm going to read a book a month. Right. And that's going to require me to read read every single day. And so for probably a week. I'd be really good. I was reading my book every single day. And then one day I didn't read my book. And then I didn't read my book again for a year. Right? Because it's like,
Again.
I didn't read my book and now I failed and it's over and I'm done.
And if you failed and it's over, what the fuck is the point of keeping going?
Exactly.
Your whole identity.
Right. Yep.
You can't contradict that identity.
Exactly. Yep.
Hey, hear our humor in this, everyone. This
Yeah.
is a lot of people, and some people are better at it than others, right? And that sounds awful because you don't want to be better at this than others, but I did. I genuinely, there were moments, I actually was talking about this yesterday, and it's very vulnerable, but I feel the need to share it. When I was in the midst of struggling the most with food and dieting and exercising, which was mainly food, was my thing of like, constantly going back and forth between restricting so heavily and then like binging and overeating so heavily, right? So when I was in the midst of that, I was actually talking with someone. It's not funny. I'm nervously laughing because I'm like, this is so, I just want to like go back in time and like love on myself so hard. But like, I remember feeling in the moments like I felt like I wasn't good enough at disordered eating, like having an eating
Mm.
disorder. Like I felt like I wasn't like disciplined enough at like making myself throw up and like skipping meals and wishing so badly. Like I felt like I wasn't good enough at that. So that's like the extreme version of what the all or nothing mentality can do to you. But similar to what Maggie's saying, if you're like, okay, what does that kind of mean? The mindset was very simple for me. It was either I was all in or all out. And it was either I was on a diet, this is kind of the most easy example, I think, for a lot of people, and especially for myself. It was, I'm doing this 100%. I'm eating clean. I'm not eating after 7. There's no carbs. I'm cutting out sugar. I'm going to go to the gym an hour a day. Like it was hardcore. And then a week and a half later, it was absolutely nothing. Nothing. There was no movement. There was no nutrient dense foods. There was nothing. And it was until then you start again, you get on another diet because you feel like shit, and then you go back and you do this, and it's like this constant roller coaster. And some people live their whole lives like this. And I think that's why we're so passionate about this topic, is that it is no way for anyone to live their life for a day, for a week, for a moment, let alone the entirety of their lives. And we jokingly say we're recovering all or nothing people because we learned very quickly that that's not a sustainable way to live your life, right? It's just the amount of, I love the word you used, Maggie, of all consuming in your head of living this type of life, this perfectionist or all or nothing type lifestyle takes up so much mental energy and so much of your focus can be geared towards that. And I look back now and I'm like, I couldn't have done what I'm doing now. I wouldn't have time in my day to even think or be creative because I would be so consumed with what the fuck did I just eat for lunch?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that example, because that contrast is very powerful, right? It can look like you giving up on reading your book, and it can look like you beating yourself up for not being good enough about your eating disorder,
Mhm.
right? And it can look like anything in between. It could look like anything farther to each extreme, right? And I think that is something that is so powerful to recognize, because if you can recognize a place in your life where you have the tendency to think this way, right? I need to do this all or it's not worth it at all.
Mhm.
If you can recognize one place where you think that way, even if it's really simple, you'll
Mhm.
start to recognize it in other places too, right? And a lot of times, once we have that awareness and once we're able to recognize it, that's honestly all we need,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes we're like, oh, well, I have to work really hard to fix this problem, right? And it's like, actually, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is just acknowledge that it's there and just let it be,
Mhm.
you know? And yeah, so I think that that's very, very powerful for people to hear. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course. And I think it's also, I'm going to completely spin off of what you're saying because it's so powerful. It is so true that once you recognize it in one area, as little or as big as it may be, wherever you choose to start, if you're someone who feels like you kind of tend to go this way, like we do, it's amazing where it creeps into your life. So I'm noticing now, like my biggest hurdle was food and body image. Like that was like my heavy lifting type stuff. But now I notice it in where, spending money versus not spending money. Or I notice it in my work schedule of crazy all in working long days versus like totally kind of being checked out and wanting to like do absolutely nothing. Like it flutters into so many areas of our lives that we don't even notice. And I think what's really helpful here is that once you identify that, right? Once you can say like, oh yeah, I got it here. Like it's definitely going on with my food, or it's definitely going on with my spending habits for money, or it's definitely going on, in this area of my life, whatever it may be. I think it's really interesting to, and also necessary, interesting and necessary at the same time, to go below that. So what is below that? And I'm going to give you my example because I've shared it briefly before, but there's always something under the stuff, right? And you're going to hear us say that constantly, but it's so true. And whatever, for example, I've shared the example before of with my eating patterns. Well, what was I really trying to do there? Why was I trying to diet so desperately? What was the point of wanting to be quote unquote better at having an eating disorder? So I felt more valid. So I felt more worthy of having something going on. And I think that if you can go a step below that, it'll be really helpful in figuring out where to go from there and why that even exists in the first place. Like, where did you pick up the tendency to be all or nothing?
Yeah. I it is that really speaks to the fact that this is a symptom, right? It's a
Mm,
symptom of something bigger. And then whatever area you're struggling in with this is a symptom of that, right?
mhm,
And for me, I have I've come to this realization many times, and I'm at a place in my life again where I'm coming to this realization, and it's deeper, and I'm, learning more about myself. But um, my all or nothing, my overachiever, my um, need to prove that I am good enough by constantly doing, right? It comes from a place of just wanting to be seen and loved and
mhm,
feel like I'm validated and feel like I'm good enough and feel like I am worthy of existing, which I know I've shared on another episode, right? And um, it's, I feel like sometimes we can get so caught up in the actual example, right? Where it's like, I don't know how to fix my problem with like, I work out every day and I go so strong and then I don't do it for 6 months because I fell off and I didn't go one day. Right. And I don't know how to fix that problem. And it's like, maybe that's not the problem.
mhm,
Like if that thing you're trying to do, which is work out every single day to make you feel like you're a valid human, is not fixing the problem of feeling like you're a valid human and therefore you give up, maybe the exercise is not that problem.
mm.
And so we have to, dig below that. And I think this is a perfect example of when we can recognize what the thing, the void we're trying to fill is with this behavior that we're all or nothing with, then, and we can just like be with that, right?
Mhm.
Usually in my experience anyway, and I know this isn't going to be um how it works for everyone in every situation, but being with that feeling is all that you need,
Mm.
right? And okay, I'm not going to feel valid, I'm not going to feel loved, I'm not going to feel worthy through exercising every single day. If I can just sit with myself and know that I need those feelings, tell myself that I am those things, which takes a lot of work, by the way,
Mhm.
and it's not easy, but if you can do that, then we're not going to connect exercising every day to that thing.
Mhm.
And then as soon as we don't feel, loved or valid or worthy, we don't stop exercising anymore because it's not connected.
Well, I feel like we abandon ourselves a lot of times with these band-aids. Like we leave the version that we know we need to sit with, and we leave ourselves so that we can go and have something temporarily hold us back together.
Mhm.
But we have to go through and actually figure out how to hold ourselves together. And one episode of our podcast is not going to teach you how to do that. And
No.
honestly, I wouldn't want it to. Sometimes I think about that. I'm like, God, I feel so fortunate that I am, the person that I am, and I've done the work that I've done. And I'm like, how do I teach this to other people, right? Because when you find something that feels so holy and wonderful, you want to share it. And I battle myself in my head a lot of times that I want to share my story and my version, but I never want there to be because I've considered it. I'm like, how do I teach people? How do I teach them how to do this? And I think that that takes the magic away from it, right? Like if we go in and we're just like, here's how you do it, and it's a textbook example. Well, I'm not accounting for all of the different things that I have absolutely no idea about your life, right? The biases you've been through, the traumas that you've had, or the joy you've had. I don't know your life at all. So for someone to come in and be like, this is how it works, and da 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 da, like I would be, it would not feel aligned. That does not feel right. And the magic is uncovering it little by little. There's no rush. When people talk about the work, right? I think a lot of entrepreneurs are the ones who talk about it the most. Like, if you think about it, like most of the entrepreneurs in our world are like the people that you see up on the stands or stages, like speaking. They always talk about like the work, doing the inner work and having the discipline and then this and then that. And I think it's because it is such an incredible feeling to get to know yourself little by little. So if you've noticed this part of you, right, this all or nothing type mentality in some area of your life, starting to just peel back the layers alone is a really powerful thing. But Maggie, if you could share a tangible example of, okay, we recognize this, we see this, we feel this, we notice that it's going on. I feel like you're the queen of really simple things that are overlooked often, of how to begin to kind of rewrite that narrative in our minds.
Thank you for that compliment. I really appreciate that. Um, the first one that's coming to mind, I actually learned from my therapist. And so I
Oh,
want to,
yeah.
start with that because this has been so powerful for me. And if you are anything like me, where you're very analytical of yourself, very hard on yourself, um, never feel like anything you do is good enough, have trouble celebrating things that you do or just recognizing them, all of those things are me. So if you struggle with any of those things, this might help you. Okay. Um, my therapist, he said to me one day, we were, talking, and he's like, so when do you say anything nice to yourself? I was like, yeah. So, and he's like, okay, so we're going to work on that. So he gave me two things. Okay. One, he said, I want you to imagine you have two people, one on each shoulder. Okay. Like the, angel and devil type of
Yeah.
example.
Mhm.
And he said, on one shoulder you have the analytical Maggie. This is the one with the ruler and the clipboard and is checking all the boxes and is making sure that everything is in line and perfect and fully analyzed, right? And then on the other shoulder you have the little hippie girl Maggie.
Mhm.
Okay. And the hippie girl Maggie just likes to go with the flow, and she's just here for a good time, and how my voice changed as I talk about these two
Yep.
different people, right? And he's like, the analytical Maggie is really big. She's like a giant on your shoulder. And the hippie Maggie's really small.
Mhm.
And we want to try to like even those out a little bit. Right. And he's like, and how we can do that is when you notice your analytical Maggie is doing a lot of talking, we want to just get to a place of recognizing that and just kind of laughing and being like, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for this insight. Thank you for protecting me, because I know that's what you're trying to do, right? And that will in turn allow the analytical side to kind of come down a little bit, and the go with the flow side to come out a little bit more, right? And I feel like for me personally, the analytical side is what drives that all or nothing,
Mhm.
right? That's what drives well, this is the best way to do this, and this is how I'm going to get the result, and if I don't do this every single day, then I'm going to do it wrong. And that is what's attached for me to the all or nothing, right? And so when I can recognize that and just see that it's all going to be okay. Like, thank you so much for showing me all of these things that you pointed out. Right. Thank you for making up this plan. Thank you for trying to protect me. And, you know, I see that you see that if I do these things, maybe I'll feel more loved. Right.
Mhm.
And, you know, like I'm talking to myself when I say these things. Right. And thank you for doing that. And then just kind of like laugh it off.
Mhm.
Right. And am I perfect at this? Absolutely not. By no means am I perfect at this. Right. But just having that visual and a goal, right, to get to a place of just like saying thank you and laughing it off helps me come back into my center and not drive forward into
Right.
the I need to do everything all the time 100% or it's bad.
Mhm. And what your therapist gave you is also what my therapist, I guess, just shout out to therapists. And I don't want to say that too loosely because not all therapists are this skilled. Like there are many people who are very different, but both of ours focus heavily on you're in control. Your truest self is in control. And those are parts of you. And we welcome those parts. And we also learn to call on them and acknowledge when they need to subtly go away. Right. So my therapist for me, that clipboard Maggie that you're talking about, my therapist calls that my manager. Like
Okay.
manager Meg comes in and she's like, you're lazy, you're fat, you're not doing a good job. You need to get it together. You know, here's your checklist of A, B, and C of what you're doing wrong. Here's how you're gonna go fix it. Like the manager comes in with the clipboard and is like, get to work, bitch. Right. Like that's how.
Yes.
And she was also huge. She was like the driving force in my mind for so long. And so also in therapy, we worked on like acknowledging that part of you. And then like kind of I picture it like almost like Inside Out vibes, like that movie they made for the kids where it's like you picture them in this little like control room in your brain and you're like, okay, I hear you, anxiety. Thank you. I recognize what you're trying to tell me. Thank you for teaching me that. I'm going to put you back or I'll listen, right? Or anger, right? Like what are you trying to tell me? Anger. Like why do I feel so angry right now? And it sounds so silly. Like we laugh through like talking to ourselves, but it's also so powerful and the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So today, for example, where I've been working, I have been walking there and I have been trying to leave my phone at home all day during the day. And it's giving me some anxiety because I have my dog here and I'm just like, God forbid something happens. Like I don't have my car and I don't have my phone. Like, whoa, like those are two huge things. And today I was at the place and I can see where my road is from the job and I see a fire truck go flying by where I'm working up to my road and turn by my house. And my anxiety starts going like, I'm telling you this real time example because I think it can make a good example of how to process through this in real time. So I'm already worried about that, right? I'm already anxious that something's going to happen and my dog's home alone and no one's going to be able to get a hold of me. And then, okay, now it's like kind of being like creeped in more because I see a fire truck flying by going up to my road and is turning on my road, right? And I felt the anxiety creep in and I was like, oh my God, I gotta go. I gotta go walk home. Like I have to go see if Milo's okay. Like I felt that bubbling up inside of me. And I had to take a moment and I was like, Meg, this is not the truth, right? Like, could something be happening? 100%. Would a neighbor go inside your house and get Milo, or would the fire department go and check for dogs? 100%. Like, I had to talk myself off the ledge and I had to recognize and welcome, okay, I feel anxious. This is making me feel more anxious. And I'm choosing, though, to stay in alignment with myself and trust that everything's okay. And even if it's not, me running up to my house is not going to make things worse or better, right? Like me letting my anxiety taking over and running up to make sure everything's okay, that doesn't do anything, right? And so that was a very real time practical example today. But once you get more fluid and comfortable with yourself and figuring out, all those voices in your head, which ones are your truest ones, it's easier then to welcome all these parts. And if you're more curious about this work specifically, Michelle Chalfant is a licensed therapist who has the model called the adult chair model. And she has a podcast as well. And so if this is really speaking to you and you want more, I highly recommend her work. She's an incredible psychologist in this way. And she'll even do models of, and this is her work now that I'm giving an example of, but in midst of having like panic attacks or things like that, she's done a few workshops on learning to have your adult self come in and act in a certain way to help with it. And she'll do a much better job of explaining it. But I think that her work is phenomenal in this way as well for anyone who's wondering about parts and stuff like that. I think it's really worth listening to as well.
Yeah, that is really cool. I like that the adult chair method is something really cool. So if you're interested in learning more, definitely go check that out. I'll link it in the description. Something that'll lead to her. I don't know what I'll find, but we'll find something. But yeah, the practical examples are so helpful, right? Because that's what we can connect to, where it's like, oh, yeah, that feeling that you're talking about, I felt that before, right? And it's like, oh, right, okay, that's the thing that I'm looking for. That's the thing that when it comes up, I'm like, oh, yeah, thank you. And I'm gonna leave that now, but yeah, I have one too, because something that I struggle with, like I said in the beginning of the episode, 5 years ago, Maggie, her struggles and thoughts still come in today, even though I'm better at handling them, right? And so one of those for me is that if I don't lift weights every single day, I'm going to lose all my progress. Which, like, I'm very educated in this field. I know that that's not true, yet I still think that, right? There's a part of me that still believes that. And so even today, I was at the gym, I was going to the gym, and I fully wanted to go to the gym today. It was one of my strength training days, fully wanted to go. And I was so excited to go. And I had a great workout and all this stuff, right? And so during my workout, I was actually running a little bit late to get on this podcast with you. Okay. And so my brain is, it's going through all of the different things. It's like, okay, Maggie, you only have one more superset to go, just 3 sets, 3 exercises, like you can finish it. Right. That was like me, Maggie, right now. It's like, everything's going to be fine. You're going to finish the workout, and Megan's not going to be mad at you for being 5 minutes late. And it's all going to be fine. Right. And then there was another part of me. There were 2 other parts. There was one other part, the people pleaser part, said, you absolutely cannot stay and finish your workout. You made a commitment to be there at 3 p.m. You need to leave the gym right now so you can get home at 3 p.m. and be there on time.
Why is this so comical? This is so good.
Because this is all the voices going on in my head, right? So that was another one. And then the third one was kind of talking back and forth to that one. And it was saying, you can't leave the gym right now. You can't not finish your workout. If you don't finish your workout, you're not going to get all the results that you came here for. Why'd you even bother coming here? Right. And so these are all the conversations that are going on in my head. Right. And so me, Maggie, today here right now is listening to them. And like, thank you for, trying to protect me from, getting yelled at, right? Because I'm sure in my past when I'm late, which this has happened time and time again, right? You're late for something, someone yells at you. I can't believe you're late. How could you do this? Right. And so thank you. That's not going to happen today. So we're going to leave that. Right. And then, there's another part that's like the all or nothing when it comes to exercise. Right. And it's telling me like, Maggie, you have to do this and you have to do it 100%. And how dare you even think about not finishing your workout? And I'm talking to that one and I'm like, even if I left this last superset and did it tomorrow, it would be okay. Or if I never did it, it would be okay. Right? It would be okay. It's going to be okay if I do it today. It's going to be okay if I did it tomorrow. It's going to be okay if I never do it. All of those things are going to be fine. Right? But I had to coach myself through that. Right. Because all these voices are going on in my head. And I'm so grateful that I'm at a place where I'm able to recognize them and not let them consume me. Right. And recognize that they're not me, Maggie, my truest self at this moment, or Maggie, my highest self of the future.
Right. And it's what a comforting feeling to know that as a human adult, we have the power to do this. right? So we don't have to be succumbed by the anxiety or the this or the that. And there's different levels, 100%. One of my favorite things that one of my professors taught me is that we all have all the stuff. We all have depression, we all have anxiety, we all have, a little bit of OCD. We all have all the clinical blah, blah, blahs. We vary on the levels significantly. And depending on the seasons, we also vary on it. So there are different layers and levels that I want to be very like mindful of speaking on, and that you're not saying clinical levels or anything like that. But when we speak in such a way, it's so comforting to know that we can address these parts of ourselves as parts, literally, because they are parts. I find so much comfort in that when I'm feeling sadness or I struggle more with some of the more uncomfortable feelings. I find it very difficult sometimes to regulate and do things. And I also think one of the most powerful layers of this is that when you feel comfortable addressing your parts, you become more free to do what you need to do, what's in alignment. So when you're not terrified of sadness, or you're not terrified of anxiety, or you're not terrified of fear or rejection or whatever inadequacy or unworthiness, whatever that feeling is that you so desperately never, ever want to fear, when you know that it's a part of you and you know that you have the tools to adequately help yourself through it and comfort yourself through it, you tend to live a more aligned and then, in my opinion, a more fulfilling life, right? Because if we're so fearful of something, we don't usually take the next step. And what I also think is really interesting, and it's just a quick little side note, is that sometimes these physical symptoms, as we say, can manifest in different ways. So, like, for example, I've noticed I can get really, I'm a feeler. I can feel the emotions, and the vibrancy in which I feel them can be very strong. And so I was feeling joy one day, visualizing like something in the future and things that I felt were coming. And I sent myself into what felt like a panic attack. And I was like, what is happening? I'm excited and joyful. And if you know like Brene Brown's work or anyone's work, in terms of research, like anxiety and excitement actually have a very similar physiological explanation. And had I not known the parts of myself, I would not be able to talk myself off the ledge. I would just feel like a prisoner to my own body and to my own mind. And I think that if anyone can have anything to feel like a whole person who's driving the car and is a healthy, functioning individual who can recognize all their parts, all 50 shades of, messed up, but also joyful beings, what a nicer place to exist.
Yes. I had thoughts and I got caught up in listening to you, which is great normally. But when I'm required to talk, my brain is
I know.
Yeah, I'm going to take a moment to sit with what you just said for a second, because for two reasons. One, it was extremely powerful, and two, I need to collect my thoughts. But let's go back to number one, which was, that is so powerful, right? That is so powerful to be able to recognize, okay, I feel this way and I'm having this response, and now I'm starting to feel this way, and oh, I wonder why. And is this real, or is this kind of just a response that I'm used to having when I feel this way? Like being able to, like you said, talk yourself off the ledge and bring yourself back to where you are right now. Right.
Definitely.
That is so, 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 so powerful. I actually had a similar experience just the other day in the gym. All my examples are coming back to the gym today. I was in the gym and I was squatting, and it was really hard. And I almost had a panic attack also. And for me, it was an experience of, I don't necessarily feel my own emotions very strongly, but I feel other people's emotions very strongly, especially people who are close to me. And so I was in the process of processing emotions that were not mine, but I had taken on, right? And for me in my present day life, this is actually one of the biggest places where the all or nothing mentality comes in for me right now. And it's one of the biggest places that I'm working on not having it be so all or nothing. But it's exactly this, where if I'm holding space for someone, or I'm listening to someone's struggles, or, being empathetic with them, I will take on everything. Or I'll dissociate and take on nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Talk
so,
about all or nothing.
yeah. So it's like
That's a good
either
example. I never even thought of that with other people's emotions, Maggie.
I'm fully
Wow.
here with you, like feeling all the things, or I've left my body. I've left my body's physically here, but my brain is somewhere else. And I'm just like thinking about other things
Oh,
because I can't take that on. Right. And so, but I don't want it to necessarily be that way all the time. I don't want it to be, I am either taking on everything that you're feeling or absolutely nothing. I want to have a balance where I can be there with you and, feel the things that you're feeling and hold space and recognize that that's not me. Right. And so that's one of the biggest things that I'm working on currently. And so I was in the gym, I was squatting. It was really hard for me if I'm doing like very hard physical activity and I have emotions that are waiting to come out. That's when they do. And so this has happened to me many times during workouts, and they all started to come up, and I had to take a second. And I'm, like I said, very grateful I'm able to do this now. And I'm not able to do it all the time, but I was able to the other day. Whereas, I just stopped and I sat down and I was like, Maggie, it's okay, that you feel this way. And remember that this isn't you. These are not your problems. These are not your feelings, truly, right? They didn't stem from you. And it's okay to feel them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's also okay to set them down.
Right. Yes.
It's a beautiful thing. And I didn't even think that, because a lot of people will identify as what you're describing as like an empath, which I don't know if you say that or not. And it doesn't matter. The label's not super helpful, but a lot of people find camaraderie in saying that they're empaths because they are just trying to explain, like, no, I feel people's shit. Like I really feel people's stuff. And I luckily am not one of those people, which is really interesting because most people who go to psych are people who oftentimes are. I'm truly not, but I am obviously very good at holding space and all those things, but it's very different when it can physically come into your body. And the all or nothing mindset, I think one of the most beautiful things about what you're saying is that I don't even think you realized you said it, but it really ties in with what our podcast was kind of birthed into, which was the blend of physical and mental health. And you sharing how a lot of times when your emotional needs or things are not being met, they come out physically. I think that that is such a testament to what we built our podcast around in a lot of ways. And this idea that we can call upon different things based on what we need, but we have to first figure out what we do need or what we do want. And the only way to do that is to just start small. You know what I mean? This work that we're talking about, it started years and years and years ago, and it was little layer by little layer by little layer, and getting curious about every little thing. And then you morph into the person eventually within whom you want to be. And then you're constantly striving to always improve the person that you are. You just are, you're not. But I believe everybody has the capability of doing that once they are, in a safe enough environment to hold the space for that. And so with this topic of being someone who is an all or nothing type thinker, a lot of times, I think the most helpful thing, visuals are everything to me. It's actually really helpful now that we have video too, but we talk about pendulums a lot, which are the little balls, right? Is that what they are?
A pendulum is anything that swings.
Okay. So do you know the ones though, like physics specifically, are like
Yes.
all little balls? Okay. So that's my favorite image because it's so helpful to me that when you pull back, and if you need this as like a reminder, go buy one of these, people. Like I think they can be really powerful image to remind yourself. But when you pull one of the balls back, it automatically affects the other side, right? You can't pull one without it colliding and hitting other ones. what is very helpful to me is that when I picture my natural brain, which tends to be the all or nothing thinking, I picture that pendulum with all those balls. I don't know how many there are exactly. And I picture that whatever I'm doing over here on the all side is going to come back to the nothing side. And to identify all the little balls on a string and to identify it as little parts really, really helps me, because it's that gray area in which I thrive. And to have it be a more fluid interaction within yourself saves me from the guilt and the shame most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time, I am able to then navigate when these emotions arise and stay within myself. And there's no better feeling than that, because if you have ever experienced, and listen, those things still happen. Do not, again, we're like really reiterating this, but I think it's important. That does not mean the panic attacks don't happen. That does not mean that the seasons of depression don't happen. That does not mean that the fear and scarcity and all these emotions, or even the joy and happiness, they all still come in so many ways. But to be able to navigate, especially the more hard emotions, right? Like fear and worry and sadness and anxiety, it's so powerful to feel like you have a way to navigate through it. Because if you have ever experienced, let's use a panic attack, for example, because Maggie and I know those too well, the feeling of like hopelessness, like you can't do anything, is, I don't wish that on anyone. Like, I don't wish the feeling of being out of control and not knowing what to do in your body on anyone. So I think that I was going to say something else, but there's nothing else. That's what I think.
That's it. Yeah. That is all that it needs to be. I also love that visual of, specifically, I can go with either just like one pendulum swinging back and forth, but I like how you explained with like having the multiple, because something that I view from that is like, if you see the pendulum, say there's 5 balls, right? Okay. You're going to have one that's close to all, and you're going to have one that's really close to nothing, and everything else is like a little bit more in the middle, right? And I think that something else that is important to remember when we talk about leaving the all or nothing mentality is that we're never going to be perfectly in the middle. Right? We're never going to be perfectly balanced all the time. There's always going to be swinging back and forth. There's always going to be seasons of doing more, seasons of doing less. But for me, I am just trying to make it a little less extreme. Right? Bring those extremes a little closer to the center, right? Know that it's still going to swing. It's still going to go back and forth, but we're just a little bit closer to the center, right? And that's really the goal for me. I have another visual that I like. I loved how you explained that, which kind of goes into what I just said. I've been seeing it all over social media lately, so there's a chance you listening have probably seen this, and you might have seen it too, Meg, but there's a post that says something like, showing up every day doesn't look like this, and it's bubbles perfectly filled in every single day. And it says it actually looks like this, and it has all the circles, and one's perfectly filled in. One is just like a tiny bit filled in. The next one's like halfway filled in. The next one's like halfway filled in, then fully, and like nothing and whatever. And it just means like taking a little step every day means showing up, right? It doesn't mean we have to go 100% full out sprinting, right? Like we can walk and still get there, and every day is going to look different. And I really like that visual too.
I really like that. And I want to give I'm not usually the one who has the tangible examples. It's usually the opposite. I would have just shot you something like that and you would have come with this, but let me see how I can do. So I'm going to kind of end us with where we started, which is food, because I think a lot of people live in that space of all or nothing a lot of the times. So as you're saying that, I pictured what I ate today. Exactly, actually. So for me now, I really prioritize nutrient dense foods, and I also prioritize not restricting in any way, shape, or form, right? I kind of allow my body and mind to work in sync with each other through a lot of work. And I'm thinking about what I've eaten so far today, and I'm like, I prioritized a high protein, breakfast. I had bone broth with a tuna sandwich, like carbs in the morning to get me going, and some arugula on top. And it felt like so good, and my body felt so awesome having it. And I had lots of lemon water today. And then for lunch, I had a salami sandwich again with some veggies. I had goldfish on the side, and I had some really high protein like cottage cheese, and then I had a Reese's after it. And like this is probably silly, like this is probably coming across in such a funny way, but it's a powerful way of I show up for those bubbles to prioritize nutrient dense foods, and I don't demonize the other ones. And that's how I find consistency. Because if I didn't allow myself to have the Reese's, or I didn't allow myself to have the goldfish, right? The things that are deemed so bad, and I don't think there's any nutrients really in either one of those things. But if I was to say, I can't have them, I'm eating all good stuff right now, like I cannot have them, I would have 25 Reese's by next week, right? Instead of having one and moving along. Like
Yes.
that's how it goes. And so when you're saying that, I'm like, I really like that. And I hope that gives a tangible example of, for example, some days I go to a really intense workout class and I really love it. And then other days I go for a 10-minute walk, and that's okay. Right. And I think that that is a much more approachable way to living this life in general than what we used to do. And I mean, for me, at least, Maggie, I had like breaking point after breaking point of like, I just simply can't do this perfectionist stuff anymore. Therefore, I was kind of forced into finding balance because I couldn't do it. I couldn't understand the point of continuing on with a life that was lived like that.
Yeah, I have been there, and I'm sure I'll get there again, right? And when recognizing things that I do now are not sustainable, right? And yeah, I really like that example. Look at us switching roles. I think we did a great job of that today.
Did a great job.
That was fun.
And
But yeah, I really like that example because it's everyone eats food, right? It's, we can look at that and it's relatable. And yeah, yep, that's all I
proud of
have.
us. And if you noticed our new intro, I hope you enjoyed it. It actually speaks
Yes.
to a lot of what we talked about today. That's kind of who Maggie and I have morphed into as a brand, is this idea of keeping things simple and sustainable, right? Life is tough enough naturally a lot of times, and to put this added pressure on ourselves is not serving anyone. And it's definitely not serving ourselves. And so to do it in a way that is, finding the balance of all those things, I personally couldn't ask for anything more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to continue to show how we can, ditch the all or nothing approach and find, like you said, simple and sustainable ways to live life and still, be badass and reach all our goals and do anything that we want, right? At the same time. And I'm just, love that.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the entirety of this episode. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with a friend. Your support helps our show grow, and for that, we are extremely grateful. Please be sure to leave a 5-star rating and a review of the show. We'll see you next Monday with another episode of the Meg and Maggie podcast. Love, Meg and Maggie.